Hello, everybody. Welcome back to We're Talking Movies. As always, I'm Andrew, joined by Cade. And today we continue our journey through the live action Batmans. We return to the Tim Burton era of Batman with Batman Returns from 1992. Now, before we get into our pros and cons, I actually have a bit of a fun fact about this movie I wish to share with you all, which is in the beginning of the movie, you will see Penguin's father. And apparently, Burgess Meredith himself, the Penguin from the Adam West era of Batman, was actually originally offered the role of Penguin's father in this, but unfortunately, due to battling a severe illness at the time, was unable to take the role. So Burton then reached out to one of his other closest friends, Paul Rubin, who would accept the role.
Well, actually, just adding on to that, I think it's very interesting that Paul Rubens would go on to eventually play Penguin's father again in the Gotham TV show.
That is very interesting.
But regarding Batman Returns, I kind of like this movie a little bit better than the first one. It's just always stood out to me a little bit more.
I wouldn't say I like it better than the original. I think the Joker in the first one is better than Penguin in this, and we'll get into that in a little while. But it's a good movie, do not get me wrong, and I do like it.
Well, to start this off, getting into our pros, the first thing that I will always highlight about this movie and the first one is definitely going to be the atmosphere. And as great as the atmosphere is in the first movie, with Gotham City, the art direction accompanied by the music, I honestly think the atmosphere in this movie is a little bit better. And I think one of the biggest reasons why is because of the fact that it's wintertime in Gotham. I think the snow really adds to the Gothic structure of the city. And I think both those elements really blend together well. And I do think that it's a great way to help distinguish this sequel from the first movie.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I had never actually considered that, but I believe this is the only Batman movie with heavy use of snow.
Yeah, apart from The Dark Knight Rises, which is also set during winter time.
Yeah, so I do feel like that does sort of amplify the more gothic nature of Gotham City.
And you know what? When it comes to Tim Burton, while I don't necessarily enjoy all of his movies, one aspect of his films that I generally appreciate is the atmosphere. Whether I'm invested in the stories or not, style is always something that I expect to be on point.
Yeah, that is something his movies are always very good at, even if the actual overall quality of the movie isn't quite up to snuff.
Yeah, but apart from that, I do definitely want to highlight Danny Elfman's score. And, like I mentioned in our review of the first one, this is always one of the best things about Tim Burton's Batman movies, Danny Elfman's iconic score. And, we've gotten a lot of great Batman themes over the years, but I really do consider this the definitive Batman theme.
I agree. And Danny Elfman in Tim Burton movies really do just go together like peanut butter and jelly. I don't know what it is about those two working together, but they seem to always make magic together. I don't know if it's the fact that they're both a little strange, if they just, find that sort of kindred spirit in each other's work. They make a very good combination.
They absolutely do. Apart from that, getting into the plot of this movie, I actually like the plot of this movie a little bit better than the first one. And here's what I mean. So when you look at the villains of this movie, when you look at Penguin's whole storyline and his motivation, while I don't think that Penguin is a better villain than Jack Nicholson's Joker, I kind of do like his motivation a little bit better. I like the idea of him running for mayor so that he can reclaim his birthright, as the son of the Cobblepot family, and how he's aided by the crooked businessman Max Schreck. And as we get more into his true motivation, you find out that he actually wants revenge on Gotham. He wants to target the firstborn sons, just like he was. Personally, I think it's a more well-constructed plot than the first movie was.
Yeah, and I really like the maybe not original, but unique take on the villain's motivation in this, because yes, Penguin wants revenge on the city, but he goes about it in a very different way. Again, running for mayor, and then, yes, he wants revenge on all of Gotham's elites, but he's not targeting them directly. He's taking out their firstborn sons. It's a very different take on the very commonly done revenge on those who wronged me plot.
Yeah, and apart from Penguin, I also do like Catwoman's storyline in this movie. At first with Selina, I like her interactions with Bruce Wayne and how their relationship grows throughout the movie. I honestly like Bruce's relationship with Selina in this better than Vicky Vale, to be honest. But also as Catwoman, I like her plan to get revenge on Max Schreck for killing her, and then, eventually she was brought back, and how she even works with Penguin. Because the thing is, it stays true to Catwoman's character because she remains an anti-hero, which is exactly what's fun about Catwoman.
I love Selina and Bruce's relationship in this. And the reason I love it is because you have two people who have clearly been both mentally and emotionally damaged for vastly different reasons, coming together, clearly falling for each other, but also understanding that they can never really be together.
And, adding on to that, you also have Batman trying to stop all the villains, obviously. But I think that's also part of what I enjoy about the plot structure, because you have all all these parallel storylines. You got Penguin's plot running for mayor and also getting revenge on Gotham by targeting the firstborns. You got Selina trying to exact revenge on Max Schreck, and then you have Batman trying to stop all of them. But what's cool about it is you have all these sort of intertwining storylines. You got Batman, Penguin, and Catwoman. You got three characters who are all outsiders and who are all driven by the traumas that they've experienced. And you have three separate story arcs that converge over the course of the film. And I think it's a very fun narrative structure.
Yes, it really is. And it's a intertwining that many plot threads is a very delicate dance to dance. And when it's not pulled off right, you end up with Spider-Man 3. But when it's pulled off quite well, like it is in this movie, you get a very enthralling story.
Yeah, and actually, fun fact for our audience, and Andrew, I brought this up in the past when we talked about unused movie concepts, but the original story of this movie was actually very different. The original story had Batman going up against Penguin and Catwoman still, but it was going to be about them teaming up to track down all these Raven statues that would eventually lead to a lost treasure that was hidden somewhere in Gotham. And while not a bad idea for a movie in general, I'm kind of glad that they didn't go with that storyline because that just doesn't really scream premise for a Batman film.
Yeah, that screams more kind of Saturday morning cartoon to me.
But apart from that, why don't we talk more about the characters and the performances in this movie?
Well, we got to talk about Michael Keaton as Batman and Michelle Pfeiffer as Catwoman. Michael Keaton as Batman is once again a great performance because Michael Keaton does a really phenomenal job portraying the very isolated, complicated character that is Batman and Bruce Wayne. A man struggling with the responsibilities of being the hero for Gotham, but also keeping up his public facade of this, very wealthy, but clearly does have a good heart billionaire, but also dealing with the inherent sort of sadness and isolation that comes with that as well. And then for Michelle Pfeiffer as Catwoman, which by the way, gold star to Michelle Pfeiffer for dealing with that costume, because apparently that costume was a colossal pain in the ass to both get in and out of and work in. According to her, they went through 60 different cat suits over the course of filming this because it kept ripping and breaking. Getting back to her performance, I love this portrayal of Catwoman because Michelle Pfeiffer does a great job. She portrays a woman who's been consistently kicked down by basically the entire world. And when she finally snaps, it does take her boss throwing her out a window to snap. She decides it's my turn to kick the world a little bit.
And I will say, while this isn't exactly, a very comic accurate version of the character when it comes to what leads to her becoming Catwoman, I will say that I think it is handled very well. I mean, it's fine to have different interpretations of characters as long as it works well. And in this case, I think it does.
And you talked a couple minutes ago. It's a very good anti-hero performance because yes, she wants to change the world in her way, but she goes about it in a much more morally ambiguous way of doing it.
And talking about Michael Keaton, the really odd thing that I've noticed about this movie as I've gotten older is that I actually like him better in this one than I did in the first movie. As Bruce Wayne, I honestly think he makes the character a little bit more charming in this one. And as Batman, one thing I do like better is his voice. I honestly think his voice sounds deeper and more mysterious in this one, which I appreciate. But I also think he gets more to do as an actor in this one. So yeah, I do think that his performance in this one is definitely a big standout. But we also need to talk about Danny DeVito as the Penguin. Now, just like with Catwoman, I will admit that this is not exactly a very comic accurate version of the character. Instead of being more of an old school mobster, he's portrayed as more of a deformed criminal mastermind who runs the circus gang. But parts of the character that I think the movie and Danny DeVito capture well is his hunger for power, because that's always one of the biggest characteristics of the Penguin. But he's also pretty strategic if you think about it, because here's the thing about Penguin. He's not just a sleazy, dumb mob boss or anything. Penguin actually can be a really clever villain, and I think that that is something that the movie does pretty well.
I will give you that he's clever, but I feel like this is one of those times where they should have been a little more comic accurate.
Yeah, I get what you mean.
Because I think we can both agree, compared to some of the rest of the Rogues Gallery, Penguin is one of the more grounded villains. Yes, he's named Penguin, but he's a mob boss. Compared to, say, the Joker or Two-Face or the Riddler or Mr. Freeze, that's a much more grounded villain. I don't know if believable is the right word, but realistic villain, maybe?
Yeah, I agree. But I will say this, one thing that I think Danny DeVito does really well in his performance is portraying the character as more of a tragic villain. Because again, you don't agree with his actions, but you kind of understand why he has so much hate for Gotham because of what his family did to him. And so, I don't know if you really sympathize with him, you can definitely see why he would go down this path because of everything that he's been through. And that goes back to what I was saying about him, Batman, and Catwoman being all traumatic characters.
That's a very good point. It doesn't quite change my opinion on Penguin, but I definitely see where you're coming from.
But apart from that, I do want to talk about Christopher Walken as Max Shrek. Max Shrek is a character who was created solely for this movie and not someone who you see in the comic. However, I actually do like Christopher Walken in this movie because I think he does a great job portraying this very sleazy, crooked businessman who's also exploiting Penguin at the same time that Penguin needs him to complete his goals. And I also do think that the dynamic between him and Danny DeVito as these villainous allies works really well.
I would Max Shrek's not my favorite part of this movie, but I think for a completely original character, I do think he fits in Gotham. He does have that sort of sleazy edge that makes him feel like he would fit in Batman's Rogues Gallery. And I like, compared to other Christopher Walken performances, he's not insanely over the top and weird in this one, but he does still have sort of a cold iciness about him.
Yes. And you know what, Andrew? They cut something out of the script that I think was a huge mistake. Penguin mentions at one point in the movie that he was the Cobblepot's number one son, but they treated him like number two. Well, originally, it was actually going to turn out that Mech Shrek was the firstborn son of the Cobblepot family. So ultimately, we were going to learn that he and Penguin were actually brothers. So, with the Penguin, you had the son who was thrown away by the family. And with Max Shrek, you would then have the son who grew up to become all successful and powerful. I'm not gonna lie, I honestly wish that they kept that in the story because I think it could have created another interesting layer and added a little bit more to Shrek's character.
Yeah, I think that would have been a nice addition.
But another pro I have with this is definitely going to be the action. I think the action in this is kind of a step up when compared to the original. I actually like Batman's fight scenes in this movie a little bit better when he's fighting Penguin's thugs and especially when he's fighting Catwoman. I always like those sequences. Or, the Batmobile chase sequence when Penguin takes control and he's just tearing through the streets of Gotham with Batman stuck in the car. I also think the final battle at Penguin's lair is actually pretty well done. You've got all the characters, the main characters facing off. You got the Bat skid boat. You got the Penguins launching all the rockets. So I think the action is pretty well done in this movie.
Yeah, no, the action is definitely very well done. I need to give a bonus pro here. I need to give a big gold star to the penguins in this because working with animals is never easy, but the penguins in this do a really good job. I mean, effectively acting. They do emote, which is very difficult for an animal to do. And apparently they were treated like absolute kings behind the scenes. They had 24-hour protection. They had their own bodyguard. They were spoiled rotten. They had basically their own little pool they would hang out in. And you could tell the penguins were happy because there was several eggs produced on set, and penguins only do that when they're content.
But despite all that, we do have our cons with this movie. Andrew, do you want to start?
Yeah, I gotta talk about Penguin in this because I like Danny DeVito and I think he was a good choice to play Penguin. And I think he gives a good performance as Penguin. But this is such a weird interpretation of the character. Yeah, like I said a few minutes ago, Penguin is one of Batman's more grounded villains. He's not over the top like Joker. So the fact that they made him this sort of deformed carnival freak and then made him, can't think of a better way to put this, but obscenely horny, felt like a very weird creative choice for me.
Maybe it's them trying to stick to the more sleazy side of the character, but I think they went a little too far.
Yeah, so for me, it's a very gross performance. It's a good gross performance, but it really didn't sit right for me.
I totally understand, and yeah, I do have my issues with this version of the Penguin. And, I mentioned earlier, you can have different interpretations of the character, but there are times where you're just doing too much with it, I think.
Yeah, because really wanted to like it, because Danny DeVito does give it socks, but it's just so weird.
Yeah, I get what you mean. But apart from Penguin, we need to talk about my biggest issue, oddly enough, with this movie, not just with Batman Returns, but with the entire Burton and Schumacher era in general. Commissioner Gordon, played by Pat Hingle in all four films. These movies, to me, really failed Gordon as a character. I will admit that I think Batman Forever and Batman Robin handle his character the worst, as they make him more of this oafish, incompetent police chief character. But the first two movies don't really do him much justice either, in my opinion. He mainly just sits back and watches what happens while Batman does everything, and he contributes practically nothing throughout the story. He basically is just there to call Batman for help or watch when things happen. But this is fucking Commissioner Gordon. He's literally supposed to be the most dedicated cop in GCPD, and he's basically non-existent in these movies. I honestly think if Gordon just wasn't in this movie, or the first one, or Batman Forever, or Batman Robin at all, literally nothing would change. So yeah, it's just kind of a waste of a character to me.
I mean, honestly, since I was so confused about the Penguin performance, I hadn't even realized how bad Commissioner Gordon was in this.
Yeah, he literally shows up after Penguin kidnaps the girl who lights the tree. They find the Batarang with the blood smear on. He goes, "This was found as evidence at the scene." That's it.
That's all you got, seriously?
And the only other thing he does is he just talks to Batman briefly. Like, he and Batman have almost no relationship in these movies at all. They literally just talk a couple times. Again, Gordon could be removed from these movies and nothing would change.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I'd even forgotten Gordon was even in this, to be honest.
Another big problem with this movie is just how easy it is for Batman to foil Penguin's plans. So here's what I mean, and I kind of thought about this a lot, and I'm not proud of that. But if you think about it, when Penguin takes control of the Batmobile and just drives it around, tearing through the streets of Gotham and everything, Batman's trapped inside. He then records the audio. Penguin's just shouting out, "Hey, I played this stinking city like a harp from hell." And then later on, when Penguin's giving his speech, you see Bruce and Alfred in the Batcave. They jam the frequency, and then Bruce plays the audio, and people hear everything the Penguin said, and this causes everyone to just instantly turn against him, and therefore ruins his plans at running for mayor. And this probably shouldn't bother me as much as it does. I don't know, every time I revisit it now as I've gotten older, this part of the movie just always annoys me because it just seems like a very easy way for Bruce to foil his plans, and it just kind of feels like an unsatisfying end for that storyline.
Yeah, it does have a little bit of the plot convenience feel to it.
But one final comment that I want to talk about with this movie, why the hell did Batman take off his mask at the end? I know that he's trying to connect with Selina more in that moment. And honestly, if it was just the two of them in that scene together and nobody else, then it probably wouldn't bother me as much as it does. But here's the thing. Max Schreck is literally right behind her. And Bruce says that he just wants to send him to jail. Yet he takes off his mask, not just in front of Selina, but in front of him. So it makes me wonder, Bruce, where's the logic here?
The only thing I could possibly think of is that maybe nobody would believe Shrek.
I don't know. It's a plot hole to me. And again, I probably shouldn't think about it too much, but it just doesn't make any sense. Again, if it was just him and Selina, I wouldn't be that bothered, but he's literally right there. And you honestly don't know if Penguin's still alive. He could literally walk up any minute, and he does in his last few seconds. But with that, let's get into our score for this movie. Andrew, what are you going to give Batman Returns?
Well, I do still like this movie, despite its flaws. I think an 8.25 feels right for this.
I think for me, not one of my personal favorite Batman movies, but always a good Batman movie in my opinion. I can rewatch it anytime. I think I'm probably going to give this movie a 7.5 out of 10.
All right, folks. Well, that concludes our review of Batman Returns. But as always, I've been Andrew. That's been Cade. This has been We're Talking Movies. Please make sure to like and subscribe and follow us on our various socials. And we will see you all next time.